double in 30 years, beginning in the year 2000. In line with this, the Asian Development Bank in 2015 projected that 56% of the total Philippine population will be in urban areas by year 2050. And despite the adoption of the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals in 2000 and 2015, respectively, poverty remains at the forefront of economic and social development discourse in the Philippines, more so with this COVID-19 pandemic. And this is one of the reasons why I gave particular attention to low income urban Filipino families and women in the sandwich generation. Today's presentation is part of a bigger study which endeavors to determine their number, the number of women in the sandwich generation, and specifically to document the experiences, needs, and concerns of low-income urban women in the sandwich generation. Addressing a problem with no local name. We do not have a local name in the sandwich generation in the Philippines. We still call it the sandwich generation. My study provided an avenue to unearth gender-based stereotypes and biases when addressed can lead to gender equality, gender justice, empowerment, and emancipation of women in the sandwich generation. My study hopes to contribute to the attainment of Sustainable Development Goal 5.4, which gives importance to unpaid care and domestic work through the provisions of policies and programs that promote a shared responsibility. In terms of my methodology, it draws from the feminist standpoint epistemology and Kabir's social relations approach and Crenshaw's intersectionality that allowed me to listen to the voices of women and to interrogate the different institutional sites they inhabit, including the PSA's census data, which will be part of my presentation. And by focusing primarily on women in the sandwich generation and using both quantitative and qualitative research methods, my study and my work attempted to understand the phenomenon of providing unpaid care in multi-generation families living specifically in the national capital region, which is the largest, the total urban area in the whole of the Philippines. No, it's one of the biggest. It's really the biggest urban area in the Philippines now, and considered one of the biggest also in Southeast Asia. As for for the results, I'll be dividing my presentation into both the quantitative and the qualitative research. But I will show you. Perhaps you're wondering, ilan ba talaga yung mga babae na yan sa sandwich generation na yan? Well, specifically, wala pong datos prior to my study tungkol sa ilan ba talaga yan. But we know for a fact that women in the sandwich generation has been in existence. And perhaps people or a lot of women or even men on an LGBT individuals who are taking care simultaneously of the older generation, their mothers and fathers or relatives 60 years old and above, no, in an extended family like the Philippines, it's very common that we have multi-generation households as well. But for this particular one, I will be showing you, how many women in the sandwich generation in the national capital region using the census data of 1990, 2000, and 2010. No, the three census periods. And by the way, I'm extending it to the entire Philippines. My current research is extending it to the entire Philippines now. Okay, so the results of the quantitative part will be divided into two. I will present to you the female household heads and the female members of the family in the sandwich generation for a period of 20 years. So, ilan ba sila? The female household heads, yung mga namumuno sa pamilya or sila yung talagang primary decision maker and providers of the family. And they are women who are taking care simultaneously of older and younger generations. Okay, so the number of female household heads aged 30 to 59 years old in the sandwich generation has been increasing. It grew 12.8% 33 times from 1990 to 2000. 12.33 times, no? While the figures in 2010 and 2000 grew larger, no, from 1.75, no, times. And within the span of 20 years, the number of female household heads in the sandwich generation rose to 21 and a half times. So dumami po ito for the sandwich generation. In terms of age, ilang taon ba sila? Okay? Over the years, the 41 to 45 old age group has the highest concentration of female household heads in the sandwich generation. And this is followed by the 36 to 40-year-old age group. Can you relate? Nandyan po ba kayo sa age na yan? In fact, the experience that I had as a sandwich generation, no, taking care of my children and taking care of my older parents and parents-in-law. I was about 30 years old when I began being in the sandwich generation. That's why I also took interest in interrogating this kind of research interest as well. So well, that is in terms of age. But you will also see that from 30 up to 59 years old, there are women also in the sandwich generation. But the highest concentration is 41 to 45 years old. In terms of civil status, across the census data, it was observed that married female household heads dominate the landscape of the sandwich generation, except for year um, 1990, where singles outnumbered all others. Okay. Take note that when we combine the number of separated and widowed together, they exceeded the number of legally married female heads of the family in the sandwich generation. Okay. So, in terms of the educational background, you will see that beginning in year 2000 up to 2010, a significant increase in the number of college graduates among the female households head in the sandwich generation has been noted. Okay, but we can also see that there are women in the sandwich generation who completed only preschool and who never finished any level of education. We still have that number, no? And then in terms of tenure status of lot, meaning to say, do they own their house and lot, or are they living informally in a borrowed land or in a lot without permission? And through the years, majority of the female household heads have legally secured their housing units. And across the census data, a very small percentage of these women occupy public and private spaces without the consent of the owners, or you call it illegal occupancy. In terms of disability, perhaps you're wondering, are there women in the sandwich generation who have disability? You will see that there was no reported disability among the female household heads in the sandwich generation in the 1990s in the National Capital Region. In 2000, 18 females lived with disability, and meanwhile, in 2010, 283 females were identified with disability who are simultaneously caring for older and younger generations in the family. Hence, there is an upward trend among female household heads in the sandwich generation who have disability. So, looking at all of these things, we can say that female household heads in the sandwich generation are typically middle-aged, without partners or spouses, college graduates, and homeowners. Nakaka-relate po ba kayo? Do you now belong to the sandwich generation, or are you a woman in the middle? Okay, so let us take a look at the female members of the family in the sandwich generation, meaning to say they are not household heads, but rather they are members or family members. Okay, let us take a look. How many do you think are the female members of the family who are simultaneously caring for the younger and the older generation? In terms of number, based on PSA's census data, no? Let us take a look. Okay. The number of 30 to 59 year old female members of the family in the sandwich generation has been increasing since the 1990s. Within a span of 20 years, the number rose 1.75 times. Nag-increase din po. And in terms of age, if family household heads, no, female household heads, they're usually 41 to 45 years old. What about those female members of the family? um, Over the years, the 30 to 35 age group has the highest concentration, no, of female members in the sandwich generation. And in terms of civil status, across the census data, it was noted that married female members of the family dominated the landscape of the sandwich generation, with singles while singles followed. And in terms of academic achievement, we can also see that the sandwich generation, members of the family in the sandwich generation, no, they have this achievement. And but we can see also that some of the women in the sandwich generation, they who are members of the family, did not complete, no, any grade level, but the college graduates again dominated, okay, the highest educational attainment. uh, but it became more apparent in 2010. In terms of disability, um, while the percentage of female members of the family with disability who are living with at least one child and one elderly is very small, census data revealed that the number of reported cases has increased over the years. The number of female members in the sandwich generation living with disability has increased, no? And when you look at the tenure status of lot, no, where are they living? No, a lot of them or majority of them have their own house or their houses being amortized. Okay, so this is the data for the disability. Okay, so there are a lot of women with disability also who are living, no, with at least one child and one older member of the family. So when we are looking at the summary of the female members, no, of the sandwich generation, the female members in the sandwich generation are typically 30 to 35 years old, legally married, and college graduates and living in their own homes. Okay. There is really this gendered character of the census data. The unavailability of data in the sandwich generation in leading government agencies like the Philippine Statistics Authority, the Philippine Commission on Women, and the Philippine um, Commission on Population paved the way for this study to rake through the 20-year NCR census data to determine the number of female household heads and the female family members who are living with at least one older person and one child in the family. It is the first time in the history of women and gender studies in the Philippines that obtaining the number of women in the sandwich generation in the National Capital Region has been done. Okay? And as defined by the Philippine Statistics Authority, a household head is the person who generally provides the chief source of income for the household unit. He, let us take a look at this. He is an adult person, male or female, who is responsible for the organization and care of the household or is regarded as such member of the household. Although the definition mentioned both male and female, the use of the pronoun he in the PSA's definition of household head is an indication of a lack of gender fair language and predilection for male dominance. While census data revealed how many female household heads there are in the last three census years, 1990, 2000, and 2010, the pronoun he in PSA's definition highlights women's status as secondary only to men. Okay? And this also is, as Ilios said, the constant reference to a single head especially the one who is male, marks the complexity or masks the complexity of the household allocation system that can act as a tool to reinforce male power in society at large. In 1997, Chant examined the pervasiveness of women-headed families at the global level, especially among the poor in developing countries, including the Philippines. My study confirms Ilios and Chant's observations because um, the results show that the number of women in the sandwich generation who are household heads has been growing in the span of 20 years. Okay. And the results of my study also show that the steady increase in the number of women in the sandwich generation is a logical consequence of a growing urban population of female household heads in the family, no, in the sandwich generation. It was noted that the proportion of these women in relation to the total urban female household heads and the total population of female members of the family ages 30 to 59 years old remain almost the same. But with the ratio and proportion of the population of women in the sandwich generation being constant in relation to the total population of women since 1990 up to 2000, one may think that the sandwich generation phenomenon in the country does not deserve attention, and inquiry. Indeed, it is quite the opposite. The fact that women who are living with at least one child and one older person persisted to appear in census data for the last 20 years means that the phenomenon has been in existence but invisible from the fair view of Philippine society, policymakers, demographers, and even gender experts. This is also indicative of how Philippine society treats unpaid care of women in the sandwich generation. The non recognition of unpaid care work in numerous studies and position papers all around the world. Its invisibility has its roots in patriarchal structures and lopsided treatment of women and men in the private and public domains. Censuses cover entire populations and conducted regularly in predictable intervals in the Philippines. In the Philippines, census usually occurs every 10 years, and while a considerable aggregated data on sex, household members, marital status, educational attainment, and housing tenure are accessible, census says specified limited information about disability. It is also silent about gender identities and sexual orientation. And even if I wanted to find out how many are those living with at least one older adult and one child, no, who are LGBT, no, who are LGBTQI individuals. I could not find it because there's no data present in the Philippine Statistics Authority. My paper recognizes the dynamics of gender inequality and insensitive language in demographic inquiry. Okay? The study of unpaid care in the Philippines may lead to a particular population processes and can also lead to our understanding and provision of policies and care, no, for women in the sandwich generation. Okay, so the sandwich generation persisted, no? And then for the results of the quantitative data, no, qualitative data rather, I'm going to show this to you. Hold on, I'm going to stop share first, no? If you have questions, I can entertain later, no? But I will also show you because apart from the quantitative data, I also looked into the qualitative data, hearing the voices of women in the sandwich generation. Based on the quantitative data, are there really, tangible, no, stories and narratives of women with disability? Are there tangible stories and cases of women who are in the informal economy? So this study, in my earlier studies, I interviewed, no, a case, no, or a participant who is intersex, but because um, intersex is not allowed to be entered in the birth certificate, uh, that person was labeled as female. Okay, hold on. I'm going to stop share first, and then I'm going to just retrieve my other presentation. Hold on. Okay, so in quest for the meanings and voices of women in the sandwich generation. So you will see that these women, no, they have seven. I interviewed seven. And then in my earlier study, I interviewed a case study. I conducted case studies concerning about um, five women also. It is really very important to see that all of these women are um, for from 47, and the youngest that I interviewed was a 33-year-old single mother. Okay, she's a solo, she's a solo mother for that matter. Okay, so it is really you can see that according to them, they accepted being in the sandwich generation because it is natural and a biological function for women to care for their families. So they do not have a choice, or they did not have a choice, because it was, they believe that it is natural and biological for women to do the same. And in terms of, domestic chores, they are saying that women really, it's natural for women to look into to these things appropriately. And class and gender, no, other identities influence the dynamics of unpaid care, and the law regard for women, no, to do disproportionately bear their unpaid care work. So they typically reveals how they do a lot of domestic chores, and a lot of them are actually doing more than 9 hours of unpaid care work a day. um, and they barely have time to deal and take a rest, no, and at the same time they have this unhidden, no, economic subsidies to the rest of the economy. So if you put economic value to what they are doing, you will find out that, for example, one case would allot around 200,000 pesos worth of unpaid care work. Okay. So, and well, of course, because the unpaid care work in the multi generation households, it can cause great source of physical, financial, and emotional burdens also of suffering. But of course, they have insufficient social protection from our government. So meaning to say, they do not have, no, this kinds of because they belong to the informal sector. They do not have the formality of work, no. They have insufficient social protection. They do not, some of them do not have field health. They do not have social security in old age, no, and the inadequate infrastructure and facilities and equipment in their home. One case study would spend practically the whole day washing clothes for her entire family, and she would complain of hunger, because she would also uh, suffer greatly because of the very low income of her family as well. So But despite all these hardships, they also find joy and happiness in taking care of their families. And their narratives also indicated their resourcefulness, their forbearance, and their resiliency. And while they are also, taking care of their families as well, it's really very important for us to know that while we are um, making these things possible, um, the family members, like the older and the younger generation, would also help them financially, would also help them in their work at home, and also for provisions in their family as well. So the lived experiences offered a discernible loci of age and geographical location. So what do you mean by this? When we are looking at these things as well, um, hold on, sandali lang po. Meron lang pong, Ma'am Dayan, sandali lang ha.
Perhaps, Joy, while waiting for Prof. Chell, maybe we can have or make some announcements for the other activities for the Women's Month.
For this week po, we're inviting all of you for our event this Friday with ugnayan ng pahinungod, which is the Mental Health 101. So aside from this is spearheaded by ugnayan ng pahinungod, UP Baguio, with Keep Going Baguio as well. So this would be held via Zoom webinar open to everyone. Though isi-stream din po siyang live via Facebook. So this is from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. And then on Saturday, that is March 20, we're also inviting everyone for our Sali Matmat, or the financial literacy. This is also open for everyone. And it would be and our resource speaker for that event would be Ma'am Dayan Acosta Corpus. And then for the following weeks, we will also have gender sensitivity orientations that would be open for UP Baguio employees and students, though we would also be streaming this live on Facebook, so everyone could still attend them. So for further lineup of events, you can check our um, Facebook page of Kasarian and Ugnayan ng Pahinungod as well. So, yan po. So while waiting po for Ma'am Chel, maybe we could start thinking about our questions for the open forum po. And later on, pwede po natin siya i-raise around 11 pag open na po nung dialogue box natin. So, thank you.
Sorry for the delay ha. Nagkaroon lang ako ng technical something here, no? Okay. I'm going to share again my slide. Sorry for that one. Okay, so for the discussion from the slide, no? As it's really very important to see that class and gender and other identities influence the dynamics of unpaid care, no. Furthermore, no, the family status, employment, the type of care provided, and the reasons why caring for younger and older generations came to be are intricate and interacting factors that define their situation. Considered kinship carers. They are considered kinship carers. They take care of the value of the vulnerable child and older persons, often unpaid and with limited support from the complex and challenging tasks that await them. Okay, the low regard for these women's unpaid care has resulted in them being denied access to social services and sufficient social protection, which in turn contributed to their lack of representation and participation in various community activities and attending to physical and personal needs. Based on the experiences, it is problematic to differentiate between practical and strategic gender interests, but a closer look brings us to the links between the two. Decreasing the unpaid care of women in the sandwich generation as a response to practical and gender needs provide opportunities for women to attend to their strategic gender interests. By means of individual agency and common undertaking, their efforts to an effect, a meaningful change must be linked to an extensive structural context that advances or curtails the achievement of these women. No, it is also important that we need to take into consideration the social protection floor for all of us, especially for women in the sandwich generation. And drawing from the staunch pioneers of the 2030 Development Agenda or the SDG, this study claims that the toil of unpaid care should be recognized, reduced, distributed by means of advocating for men and women, boys and girls, and older family members to assume equitable, caring responsibilities in the family and in the community in order to give women to have time and energy to represent themselves on matters that affect their lives. It's really very important for us to provide them all of these things. I am not saying that we have to pay them monetarily, no, but we have to recognize, we have to see, we have to put it in our consciousness that women, a lot of women, especially women in the sandwich generation, are having a lot of difficulties. They are having physical, emotional, social, even financial difficulties. And I think that one way to help them is not only to provide them social protection, but to also help a lot of people realize that these women also need care and protection from their family members. And it is important to start with the boys and with the girls as well. And men can equally share household responsibilities. We need to recognize. How do we recognize? We have to see and give them credit to all the things that they are doing for the family and for the community. We have to reduce. How do we reduce their work? Of course, by redistributing, their work to other family members and to other communities. No, sometimes there is this idea that women can do less at home because they are not patient enough to take care of the children. But is it not also our way of gender stereotyping men? So it's about time that we also provide opportunities for men to take care, no, and share in household responsibilities. And I know also of a lot of men who are now taking care of their older parents, no, or older relatives at home. So it's really very important to recognize, reduce, and redistribute, no, all of this unpaid care work to family members and to community members as well. And when we recognize, we reduce, and we redistribute or distribute unpaid care work of women, they will have more time to improve themselves. They will have more time to take care of their needs and interests. Perhaps they will have more time to, deal with their own problems. Because self-care is really very important. Something that is common among women in the Spanish generation, in particular, and about women in general, is they forget about self-care because they feel that self-care is selfish. But we know for a fact that when we take care of ourselves, we have time to enrich ourselves, perhaps academically, cognitively, socially. No, we have time to pause and take a rest even for a while. No, we know for a fact that we will reap the benefits of all of these things. So yeah, that's why it's, again, I emphasize that it's important to recognize, we recognize the economic value of these women, no, contribution to their families and to the community, to have to reduce their unpaid care work by distributing the households to the household chores or the domestic chores to other family members, and of course so that they will have time to participate in things that matter to them as well. So for the recommendations, as the first attempt to use quantitative approach, information about women and how and when to collect data dependent on the sources available, as accessibility to this data is expensive. Steps that can be taken to make them free for purposes of scientific and academic inquiry should be done. And statistical linkages on various data sets on women and households can allow researchers to bring different, ideas together, different time points, while at the same time providing the individual's um, right to confidentiality and privacy. Uh, Also, I have observed that the 1990 census did not contain information about persons with disabilities. It was only in 2000 census that that there was a deliberate move to count the number of persons with disabilities. So our what you call this, yung ating data dictionary in the 1990s did not contain disability. But when 2000 census data came, the data dictionary already contained what we call what you call ano pala nito, disability. So in the same breath, we can also see, no, and following this trend, the sandwich generation can be made visible in succeeding census population, including, no, finding out how many are LGBT individuals, no, and there is this need to make government agencies made aware of the existence of women in the sandwich generation, and a multi-sectoral partnership could be created to determine the economic value of their unpaid care work and to conduct in other urban and rural areas in the Philippines. No, um, um, really, I right now I'm extending, no, my study, no, to the entire country. I'm doing it right now using the same uh, process of obtaining census data, no, for the entire Philippines from 1990, 2000 to 2010, and hopefully I'll be able to present that before the year ends, no, and also whether this particular thing is present in low income, in other low income countries as well, because the literature basically is dominated by Western literature and focused heavily on women in the formal economy, meaning to say those who have an 8 to 5 job, who have this employer-employee relationship. But whether these things are, present or recognized in other low-income countries, we are not very sure about that as well. Okay, in terms of the voices, the realities, the existence of women in the sandwich generation, um, based on the results of my study, no, the recognition of unpaid care in levels have to be, recognized, no, and the development of legislative frameworks, no, should be done as well, and there should be a harmonized Philippine social protection floor, and to provide also women, these things as well. And uh, stakeholders may include, no, in the search, no, for finding out the experiences more and how this is present in other urban areas and other rural areas, also need uh, you know, to include women themselves, development workers, feminists, demographers, and human rights advocates. So that ends my presentation. These are the references that I have used for this particular um, presentation. And happy Women's Month all to all of you. And we make change work for women. And I hope that this presentation will also bring consciousness to the consciousness of the Filipino society that there is what we call women in the middle. That perhaps there are also men in the middle, and I'm quite sure that there are also LGBT individuals in the middle, or those in the sandwich generation. It's about time that we recognize, we reduce and distribute their unpaid care work so that they will have time to engage in matters that affect them, and matters that would also benefit themselves, their families, and their communities as well. So we can make change work for women regardless of whether they are simultaneously caring for their children and their families or not. Okay? So maraming maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat, at pasensya na po doon sa pag-off ko kanina. Meron lang pong konting emergency dito. Marami pong salamat sa inyong lahat.
Thank you po, Ma'am Chel, for that very informative talk based on your researches. So for now po, maybe we can have a 5-minute break, and let us also take this opportunity to raise our questions for the open forum after nitong 5-minute break. So kindly type na lang po your questions in our dialogue box. So maybe we can start our open forum at 11 o'clock. So yeah. Thank you. Yan. Hello po. So tapos na po ang ating 5-minute break. So meron pong nagtanong, Ma'am Chel.
Yes.
May 3 questions po ito. So from an anonymous attendee. So sabi niya po, this is a very interesting study, Prof. Tongson, and I agree that this study can be seminal to further looking at unpaid care work in other groups like the LGBTQIA+, the PWDs, urban rural women in the Philippines. First question niya po is, were the women interviewed in the study expecting any compensation for their unpaid care work?
No. Sige, I will answer. Sige, I'll just finish the question. I'm going to write down the questions.
Then the second is, what are some striking differences of providing unpaid care work between the West and the East, particularly in the Philippines? And then third po is, were there respondents in your interview who had OFW partners po? So yun po yun.
All right, those are very interesting questions. For number one, thank you for that question, no, and taking interest also in my research. Are they expecting to be paid? No, they are not expecting to be paid. Kasi meron kasing misunderstanding dyan parati. Pag sinabi bang unpaid care, kailangan ba silang bayaran o pareho ng ating mga kasambahay, diba? O kaya yung mga cleaners natin. Hindi, kasi they are doing this also as part of their service to their families. So ako, I don't also encourage paying women at home, but I think the more appropriate thing to do, as I have discussed already, is to recognize, to share, no, with the responsibilities at home, to make work at home equal, no. Wag nating iisipin na dahil lalaki, hindi pwedeng magluto, or hindi pwedeng mag-alaga ng bata, or hindi pwedeng maglaba. I think it's about time for us to also teach our boys and girls to do away with gender stereotypes in terms of doing household chores. That's also an interesting question about how is the West and the East, no, taking care of multi-generation household different in the West and the East. Definitely, there's a difference, no. You can also see that studies conducted, for example, in China, in Japan, because the Pew Research Center studied also women in the sandwich generation in industrialized countries in Asia. No, and they found out that Asians basically are more committed to take care of their older parents or even relatives, and they would go a long way like Filipinos to take care and spend for the hospitalization of their parents as well. And I think there is something different also in such a way that we also see the good side of being in a multi-generation family, because ano tayo lagi tayong merong kasama sa bahay. In Western countries, they do not have that kind of arrangement like in the Philippines. Our kinship system is more parang parang mas closely knit tayo in that aspect. But it does not also mean that women in the sandwich generation in the Philippines are not stressed out like those in the Western societies, no. And a lot of Filipinos, no, yung sa mga na-interview ko ng mga babae, even in my earlier research on the sandwich generation, is they're really committed to take care of the older generations all by themselves at home. Okay, but with the growing demand, no, to work outside of the home, and also with the growing projection, no, increasing population that will be in the urban areas by 2050, no. So I think we need to prepare how we are going to provide for both the older and the younger generations, so that women also can contribute greatly to the improvement of their careers or their personal needs, and also for educational purposes as well, and economic participation. Yes, there are OFWs who were part, no? Mga dalawa yan, dalawang OFWs na mga asawa nila nasa abroad. Okay, so they are providing financial support enormously. But I also had, a participant who was an OFW, no? So, pumunta na siya dito, bumalik na siya sa Pilipinas, and then when she uh, returned to the Philippines, because she was already 55 years old and she was no longer allowed to renew her contract, sabi niya, mas nakakapahinga pa ako nung nandoon ako sa abroad, kasi all I needed to do was to clean the restrooms, no? But here in the Philippines, all the work is mine, because my husband is a bus driver, and he is already tired driving all day long, as if this particular woman is not tired doing household chores all day long, taking care of her sickly elderly father, no? And also even her nephews and nieces, because they are living in a compound. So this is what I am saying, that since society expects women only to take care of their children, sometimes they would not recognize that they too are tired and need rest and help from family members. Yes, I hope I was able to answer your question. Yes. And also, I would like to answer this one, looking according to Ma'am Dayan, Professor Acosta, Corpus, looking at the economic dimension of the study where your discipline can contribute. Yes, I welcome that. I'm still writing, no, this particular part of my study. This is just only a fraction of my whole study, because I'm really, really interested. And it came from my own experience as a woman in the sandwich generation, because when my children were growing up, and I have an older father and mother, and my aunts who are single also, of course I needed to take care of them. Of course, that was difficult to juggle and to balance things, no. And I found also a lot of comfort and a lot of satisfaction taking care of my children and my older members of the family. But I was thinking, paano kaya yung mga ibang walang pareho ko? No, paano yung mga hindi puwedeng magbayad ng ospital, or kailangan pa nilang mangutang, at kailangan nilang huminto ng pagtatrabaho nila, at mawalan sila ng GSIS or ng Social Security, no? Kasi kailangan nilang mag-absent, eh. So, paano na sila 'pag matanda na din sila? At paano na nila aalagaan ang kanilang mga sarili at ang kanilang mga anak? So, that's why it was also the beginning of my interest to look into the sandwich generation. Yung sarili mong hugot, minsan diyan napupunta yung pag-aaral mo as an academic inquiry. And incidentally, because my panel member, si Dr. Melissa Serrano, she's from Soler, she said that we have to surface the economic value of women in the sandwich generation, not to pay them, but to also recognize. You see, the McKinsey Global Institute estimated 10 trillion US dollars uh, globally, no, in 2015. So regardless of whether you are in the formal or the informal economy, regardless whether you are a doctoral degree, or you didn't finish any grade level, you provide unpaid care work, and there is economic value to it. And every time economists would say, correct me if I am wrong, I am not an economist, no, but there is always this hidden economic subsidy, kasi uh, kesa magluto ka, no, pupunta ka sa isang karinderya, bibili ka na lang. Pero alam naman natin na those women in the informal economy are not paid well, no. And based on this one, no, I'm going to share with you, because according to the Philippine Statistics Authority in 2018, no, Those with elementary occupations such as domestic helpers, like those that I have included in my original study, and cleaners, no, and food helpers, no, food preparation helpers, they earn around 260 and 36 pesos daily. Okay. Meanwhile, those who are in clerical support, like those admin staff, no, or those who are, what you call this, yung mga sekretarya natin, mga ganyan, those, they are earning about 535 and 80 pesos a day. So if you will divide that into 8 hours a day, you will have, uh, you know, 32 pesos a day, more or less. So if you, like, for example, determine the number of hours these women are doing, no, this is just based on my computation. Like, for example, the other woman, no, the first case that I had, she provided an average of 9 hours a day of for unpaid care work, doing laundry, cleaning the dish, washing the dishes, cleaning the house, taking care of her grandchild, and also her um, elderly mother-in-law who has dementia, no. So she would earn, uh, her unpaid care work would be around, in a year, no, about 100,000 pesos. That's the value of her unpaid care work. It's just one example. So I know that there are also a lot of formula to do that, but my study focused on uh, providing more or less the value, economic value of unpaid care work. Yes, Dayan, I would like to have a collaboration with you and find out in a national scale, or perhaps in Baguio, how much, an economic what is the economic value of the unpaid care work of women in the sandwich generation.
Thank you po, Ma'am Shell. Are there any other questions po ba? Ay, ito, Ma'am Shell. Ask ko lang po, yung mga na-interview nyo, full-time po lang, full-times po ba sila, or pwedeng nating incorporate yung double burden, like they have to work to earn a living, as well as yan, take care of their family at home?
Yeah, they have multiple burdens because, even those who are in the informal economy, like, for example, I mean, the women in my study, they are, I have provided them, hindi yung mga totoo nilang pangalan, anonymous sila din, no? But to protect them also. So, like, for example, Melinda, she is a laundry woman. She washes clothes for other people, and she lives in the city, also in the national capital region. And doon siya sa informal sectors area. And her house is located at the far end, no, of the informal sectors community. And she would wash clothes twice a week to to a family, no, for a family also. So yun ang ano nila. And then, despite the fact that she has doing all of these things, she volunteers in the barangay, no, to do ano pangalan nito, parang yung naggagamot ba, she volunteers as part of the BHW. Meron siyang ganong kalaseng community role, no? And also another one, like, for example, the other case, she has two children with disabilities. Okay, and she works as a food server in a karinderya. Okay. And then, because her children are children with disabilities, two of her children, she would volunteer in the barangay as part, and she is also a solo parent. So that's why it's really very important that when we interrogate the condition of women in the sandwich generation, we are not only wearing our gender lens, but also our intersectionality lens. So this particular woman in the sandwich generation, um, She is a solo parent, no? She has two children with disability, and she is a woman in the informal economy, also living in an informal sector within the UP campus, no? In informal settlers sila sa UP campus. So in Diliman. So can you imagine the kinds of difficulties and challenges that she has, no, as a woman in the sandwich generation. So pag tiningnan natin 'yan, um, pag 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 tiningnan natin 'yon talaga, makikita natin na she is volunteering also because she wants to get, free seminars for her children. She wants to get also to learn more about the rights of children with disabilities in the barangay. And she's volunteering to do work for an organization of solo parents, because she knows that she would get, some perks out of it, and she would learn a lot of, things from the seminars and parent education sessions that the barangay would provide, so that she can help her two children with disabilities. So nakikita natin na they're really experiencing multiple burdens, yung kanilang pangalan nito, yung kanilang multiple burdens ni Moser na tatlo. That's why we cannot really separate, no, the multiple burdens of women, the productive, the reproductive roles, and also the community management roles of women. And when she volunteers to the barangay, including Malen, no, they are my other case, no, who is a laundry woman. Ano talaga yun, ginagawa talaga nila yun out of their free time. So, imbis na magpahinga sila sa bahay during Saturday and Sunday, they would go to the barangay to help out. Yeah.
Thank you po, Ma'am Che, for answering my question. So, siguro last question na lang din po. And, since nag-start po kayo nitong research nyo back in 1990, so 1990, 2000, and 2010.
Yes.
So, yan. Yan. So, increasing naman yung number ng women in the sandwich generation. But, is there any other things na nakita nyo or parang stagnant yung info na nakuha nyo?
Well,
like when it comes...
Sige, Joy.
Like yung different aspects, like for example, college graduates, yung are they housewives or are they married? So yun po, yung different aspects po. Or are they almost the same throughout? Nag-increase lang po ba yung number nila?
Nag-increase yung number nila in general because I found out also that it could be attributed to the increasing number of women also in the urban area. Kasi di ba, marami tayo, tumataas yung population natin every year. So the upward increase could also be attributed to the increasing number of women in general. Kasi ang ginawa ko kasi sinala ko sila eh. Kumbaga, nilagay ko sila sa strainer tapos sinala ko sila using Stata. Tapos nakita ko na sa variable, it should include women 30 to 59 years old with at least one child and one older person living So hindi pa ako bumababa doon sa marami siyang anak na bata, 17 years old and below, because it's really we could say na dahil malaki yung number size o yung size ng Filipino family, baka marami pang babae na more than one child and one older person in the family. I just limited it to that particular criteria, no, in selecting whom I will study. Okay, because in the cases that in the narratives, yung actual cases that I interviewed, by the way, I didn't interview them only for one day. I established because I use the feminist standpoint epistemology, and we know for a fact that when you are using feminist research, no, and you have a gender lens and intersectionality lens, and you want really to have social justice, you are not only, extracting data, but you're working around, these women. You establish, good relationships with them. And then, kailangan binabalikan sila, hindi sila iniiwan. That's why even at this point, the 7 women and the other 5 women in my earlier studies, I still have communications with them even during the pandemic. That's why I still have a lot of questions about how this pandemic has been affecting women in the sandwich generation in particular, because we have very little data about women in the sandwich generation in the Philippines as well. So going back to your question, Joy, um, well, the single women in the sandwich generation as household heads, meaning to say, they are the primary economic providers and decision maker in the family, as specified in that, the definition of PSA. They have been in existence for the last 20 years. So, kaya lang pag titingnan mo yung cohort na yon, no, you will see that many women who are household heads, who are taking care at least one child and one older person in the family, pinakamarami sa kanila yung nasa 41 to 45 years old. But across all age range from 30 to 59 years old, women are who are household heads, no, of the family are in the sandwich generation, or women in the middle. So, well, they are saying na, yung household heads, member of the family din naman sila, diba? But I think there is this different demand on the household heads to provide and to decide. So everything pertaining, even the minor, no, the most minor issues in the family, if you are a household head, sa'yo lahat yun eh. 'Di ba? Saan mag-aaral mga anak mo? Anong lulutuin mo? Chicken ba o manok? Ikaw din yun kasi household head ka, 'di ba? Saan ka bibili? Paano mo iba-budget yung pera mo? So, can you imagine if you are a person with disability, you are a solo parent, and you are in the informal economy, and you're taking care at least one child and one older person. So how much disadvantages do you have? Right? So that's why we need to surface, no, all of these things, not to make them sabihin natin, ay, kawawa naman sila. It is not my intention to do that, but it is also my intention to bring to light, no, their issues, their concerns, and also their capability. Because, you'll be amazed talking to these women because ang dami nilang kayang gawin. Ang dami-dami nilang kayang gawin. Pero regardless of whether regardless of their contribution to their enormous, I would say, enormous contributions to their families and their communities, sometimes, or more, not sometimes, but more often than not, they forget about self-care. Parang may guilty feeling na kailangan alagaan ko rin yung sarili ko. And these women, when you ask them about what is it that you like for yourself, there's this one case who said, sa akin, ma'am, 50 pesos na lipstick na pula, masaya na ako. 50 pesos na lipstick, di ko ma-imagine na may 50 pesos pala na lipstick. And then, or papa-pedicure ako, yun yung kanilang mga self-care. Or I will just go to ukay-ukay to buy myself these things. And that makes them feel good about their things. Parang it's a sort of a reward. Yun lang yung medyo nalungkot ako doon. Kasi when you think and you ask them about what they want, they would say, well, it was also shared many times by Nazi, na they don't want, or they want very, very little for themselves. Everything would be for their children and for their families. So can you imagine if you are taking care of two generation, two generations in your family? So what else do you think a woman in the sandwich generation would want for herself? See, so I want us to be more conscious of the needs and interests, not only of the women in the sandwich generation, but women in general. And I think it's about time for us to recognize their contribution at home. Let's not make this, babae yan kasi talaga namang trabaho niya yan. Well, oo, trabaho niya yan, but should we not also share with the burden so that their burden will be lighter?
kung pwedeng lahat ng responsibilities makuha lang, no? Like, very other-centered ang women. Very nurturing. Ma'am Chal, may isa pa pong question. Sabi niya,
Yes
hi
po.
po, first of all, sobrang, ayan, may questions pa, ayan, may two
Yes, okay
questions
lang
pa po, Ma'am
po.
Chal. Okay lang po.
Yes, no problem.
Sabi niya po.
I have allotted the entire morning for UP Baguio and for the listeners as well.
Ang sabi niya po, first of all, sobrang salamat po sa topic kasi ngayon ko lang po nalaman na meron palang sandwich generation. Very eye-opening po. Anyways, curious lang kung meron pong data na nagsasabing hindi active choice or forced responsibility sa ilan sa respondents na maging caretaker, because we know women can have other priorities over being caretakers as well po.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. In fact, one of the things that I asked them is, what was your reason to take care of your parents or your parents-in-law, no, in their old age? Most of them would say, kasi ganyan naman talaga. Talaga namang babae ang nag-aalaga. Okay. Ganun naman talaga eh, 'di ba? Pinanganak naman talaga yung mga babae para maging tagapag-alaga. I don't think there's something wrong about, taking care of our old parents or our older parents. I think we owe them these things, no? At saka kailangan caring eh. That's a feminist value. We care, no? We show care to a lot of people, no? Um, pero meron din by choice. Like me, for example, I was not obliged by my parents-in-law or my parents or even my aunts to take care of them in old age. But it was my choice because I feel that it is my obligation to take care of them. Um, and the women that I have interviewed as well, uh, ano, some of them would say, like for example, the other one, mother-in-law niya yon at inaabuso siya noon, no? I mean, may violence against women pa rito if you want to look into the challenges and issues of women in the sandwich generation. The other case, kalimutan ko na yung mga pangalan nila, tingnan nyo. Kasi hindi ko sila dapat nire-reveal, di ba? Ng bonggang-bongga dito. Yung mga totoo nilang identity, that's what I mean. But, their narratives are so tangible na, inaabuso pa siya ng mother-in-law niya. Binubungangaan siya araw-araw ng mother-in-law niya. And single siya, namatay na yung asawa niya. Pero bakit yung mother-in-law niya sa kanya nakatira? Hindi dun sa mga anak ng mother-in-law niya. And kung siya lang, sa kanya lang, gusto niya nang paalisin yung mother-in-law niya. Imagine mo, umaga pa lang, tatalakan ka na dun. Sabi niyo, bakit ganito yung ulam? Bakit ganito lang yung, may mga ganun pa siya na kwento. And some of them, it was their choice. Some of them, it was, the responsibility given by society. And some of them would rather not, be in the sandwich generation. But, because society dictated, quote unquote, they believe the society dictated them to be like that. So they do not have a choice but to do it also.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Chel. So, based po dun sa study nyo, parang most women think na innate na yun sa kanila, aside
Yes.
from, the traditional way of thinking na it's responsibility of women, it's innate in them. Pero, meron din po bang sabi mismo na parang, ayan, I mean, nasabi nyo na rin na parang it was responsibility forced by our economy or social status at the moment. So yan po. So, yan. I think nasagot naman din po itong question na to. And ito po, last question na po to. Ito, just curious if there are already existing programs to help the women who are part of this generation.
Okay. So, gusto ko lang, bago ko sagutin yung about existing programs, there is this anonymous attendee who is interested to look into female household heads. Yes, I would be glad to share with you the researches that I have, no, the journal articles that I have published already in relation to this study. Uh, and then, yun nga po, wala pa. There's no existing program at this point in relation to the women in the sandwich generation. That's part of my efforts to make them visible. There's no local term in the sandwich generation, and um, we're moving towards that. But when we are doing policy and program implementation, it's also important to uh, convince people, because some people would say, isa lang naman yan, or 15 tao lang naman yan. But when we are doing and using the feminist research, isa nga lang, marami na yun eh. Parang sinasabi natin na gano'n. So, yes, we would like to, start programs for them, no? And perhaps implement policies. We can start with the barangay, incidentally, in Quezon City, because not only I'm from Quezon City, because there's this idea that since Quezon City is one of the largest cities, no, in the Philippines. At that time, si Mayor Joy Belmonte, I interviewed her what her thoughts are, because I know for a fact that I also need policymakers and local chief executives to make the women in the sandwich generation visible. Yun, meron naman effort. Wala pa ngayon effort. What I mean is that, but we have to make, and start, gathering more data to have programs. Kasi natatandaan ko noon, yung persons with disability, wala namang programa para sa kanila. In fact, even older persons, they are not recognized with their, as a unique sector of society. So my purpose also in this work is also to create programs that are appropriate for women in the sandwich generation. Not only for women in the sandwich generation, but basically all of those in the sandwich generation. Yeah, and I hope you can, somehow help me propagate the idea of the sandwich generation in the Philippines.
Looking forward for that time po na magka-program na talaga specifically for women in the sandwich generation. And yan, may pahabol pong question si Ma'am Karen. Maybe I can ask, maybe Ma'am Karen, you can you can turn on your camera and ask Ma'am Chel the question po.
Hello, Ma'am Chel. Thank you for your talk. I just want to ask po, it is common in the household to designate care work to the eldest daughter in the family. So how does this affect the dynamics of care work? And how does this refers to the reinforcement of gender stereotype for the next generation? So typically po, the responsibility ng mothers, it is passed on to their eldest daughter or the eldest daughter in the family. So how does that affect the dynamics of care work? Thank you po.
Oh, well, one, it reinforces gender stereotypes. Diba? And in fact, even among transnational families, ang dami nating mga pag-aaral dyan, na yung remittance nung nanay na nagtatrabaho sa abroad, di niya binibigay yun sa tatay, binibigay niya yun sa older child. Sa older daughter pala. So may mga ganung pag-aaral, no? Well, yes, it would definitely affect. Tsaka parang ano mo yun, it reinforces nga, no, the gender stereotypes that it's only the women and, well, the girls, the older girls in the family who will be responsible or who can be responsible in caring for the entire family. I think we should deviate already from that idea and start training both boys and girls to the idea that regardless of their gender, regardless of their sex, they are capable of being responsible for the entire family. Yeah, we should start them young, no? Na parang, mga lalaki, hindi yan pwedeng pagkatiwalaan mag-alaga. It's also, equally saying and, parang reducing, no, their ability or their capability to take care of their families as well. And we know for a fact, no, that both males and females, boys and girls, no, and regardless of their gender, whether they are gender non-conforming or not, they can be and they are very, very, very capable of taking care of the older and the younger generations.
Thank you
Thank
po,
you
Ma'am
po.
Chel.
Salamat, Karen, sa tanong mo.
Yan. Since yun na po yung last question, yung kay Ma'am Karen. Thank you so much, Ma'am Chel, for accommodating our questions. So to formally close our event, may I ask Ma'am Karen De Castro to give the closing remarks po.
First of all, I would like to thank Ma'am Professor Excelsa Tongson for agreeing to conduct this talk. So you shared your knowledge to a lot of audience here today, and we are inspired with your research, and we are looking forward to a time where Filipino women in the middle will be much more recognized and will be given empowerment and space in society. So thank you very much for all those who attend. And again, we are looking forward to having you again in our office. Marami pong salamat at abangan nyo pa po ang mga susunod na events ng hinanda ng kasalian para sa Women's Month. Thank you po.
Marami pong
Pahabol na,
salamat. It's my pleasure. Ay, sige po. Joy, ano pa po? Meron pa po?
pahabol na lang din po, for those who would like to have a certificate, kindly answer na lang po the evaluation form. So sinend ko po yung link dun sa ating dialogue box. Ma'am Dayan, may sasabihin po ba kayo?
Oo, also, Ms. Chal, again, thank you so much for spending your time with us and sharing your thoughts. What a wonderful research, and this serves as an inspiration for us also, no? Somehow, para makita din namin yung ibang dimensions na yon, and nonetheless, we can also apply the methodologies that you have somehow suggested in your paper. Magawa din sana namin yon, no, dito sa sa different locales ng ating mga viewers. Okay. Again. So
Thank you very much for the invite. It's my
maybe we
pleasure.
can have photo ops for documentation po.
Ay, yan po. Ay, sige po.
Okay, sige, kahit ako na lang. Karen, favor, will you be able to?
Hindi po kasi available yung camera ko ngayon. Pasensya na po.
Okay, sige. Okay, tayo na lang. All right, sige. Let's have some photo ops. 1, 2, 3, smile. Again, 2, 3, smile. Okay. Sige. Your final words, Joy.
Thank you so much po for attending, and happy Women's Month po.
Daming attendees sa Dayan.